Hello, it's a lovely good evening once again to each one of you from here in Delhi, and as always hope that each one of you are absolutely fine, happy, and of course in fine spirits. And we on our part always pray to the Almighty to give you all the happiness in the world and at the same time to shower supreme amount of success upon you. So on such note, we start today, as I promised in the last session, that today we are going to start business combination. Correct? So business combination is the chapter which we are going to start today, and so we are going to start the journey for the upcoming examinations. As I have already told you that these classes are primarily meant for the December 22 and June 23 examinations. Now, before I start this particular chapter, my request to each one of you is that please don't raise questions like this in between the class. How you are going to get the PDF notes, or at the same time, so where from we can buy the classes, and how much portion you are going to cover. So all these or all such questions will be surely answered, but answered after a while. Correct? Further, I want to make a very important announcement here. The announcement is that because you must understand that we are giving live classes, at the same time, as you know, actually, we sell our courses through different authorized sites of ours, and as I call them, associate sites. So we have to see to it and keep a proper balance that the interest of our associate sites are not what we call hampered, and their interest are kept very safe too. So that is the reason actually that these live sessions, once I will take, so after a particular point of time, these classes will be taken off from YouTube. So it is very important for you to that whatever time is given, scheduled time is given, you should be present over there, and always attend the full session, because it could be a possibility that if you may wish that after some time you will be able to watch the lectures, so perhaps it could be a possibility that you may not find the same on the YouTube. So that is the reason actually why I am telling this particular important fact to you. So now we come over to business combination. Each one of you are very well aware that it's a very important, significant chapter, formidable chapter, and needless to add that one required great amount of what we call knowledge, in-depth knowledge, to have a supreme command over this complex chapter. You can say so that way around. Also, one point, as I told in the last session also, we are going to cover each and every question of the module. But straightway we cannot take up the module questions. It is very important for you to have a bit of patience, and once we shall have finished the chapter, then you can have a look over your module and you will find that each and every question has been covered well and truly. Correct? So now we come to the business end. These are the fare sheets. I am going to use them later on, as you know. First of all, just let me have a bit of discussion with respect to business combinations. Correct? Business combination. Ind AS 103, as you know, deals with business combination. Ind AS 103. Ind AS 103, or you can say IFRS 3, deals with business combination. These are rough sheets at this particular moment. You need not require to write. Business combination. Actually, the name of the chapter is Business Combination and Corporate Restructuring. Business Combination and Corporate Restructuring. Business Combination and Corporate Restructuring. Corporate Restructuring. The moment I am going to utter the word business combination and corporate restructuring, some of you might feel actually that you are quite acquainted with these wordings, isn't it or not? And you are not wrong in this particular case. The reason being is very simple, because you have gone through this particular chapter or such sort of wordings in your earlier phases of education. If you remember, you have done accounting standard 14. Even over there, you have studied amalgamations and absorptions and internal reconstructions and external reconstructions, isn't it or not? So some of you might be tempted to feel actually that this particular chapter might be on similar lines, correct, which you have done. I wish I could say so, but unfortunately that is not the case. You have to now do business combination. It is similar to amalgamation, absorptions, no doubt about that, but at the same time, accounting is entirely different, correct? When we did AS 14, over there we used to hear the words like vendor company, purchasing company. Vendor company is the one which is selling its business to somebody else, and the purchasing company is one which acquires the other entity, correct? These are the words which we used to actually use under accounting standard 14. But under Ind AS 103, not only the terminology has been changed, we will see later on that an entire accounting pattern has gone a sea change. So that is the reason actually don't tempt to think and don't jump over the conclusion that perhaps it is quite similar to AS 14 which you have already done. So it requires paramount amount of attention, hard work, and of course dedication to have a good command and complete supremacy over this particular what we call topic. And we'll see to it on our part definitely that each one of you derive maximum amount of what we call command over this particular topic. But little bit of patience is required. That is what I said in the beginning. So business combination and corporate restructuring. What we mean by business combination, first of all, you need to understand that. Then we will see to it what exactly is the theme of Ind AS 3 or IFRS 3, correct? Because that is exactly what we are supposed to do. And honestly speaking, in our notes, we have kept 20 sections. So indirectly, if you presume that each section carries on an average 5 questions, even then it becomes 100 questions. So all in all, we will try to do near about 80 to 100 questions in class so that you acquire complete proficiency in this particular chapter. Correct? So on such count, now we begin the session. Let us say, if I say company A acquires the business of company B. Company A, you need not require to write anything at this particular moment. When I will ask you to write, then only you start writing, correct? These are rough works. Company A acquires business of company B. Company A acquires business of company B. First of all, you need to understand that this is company B, and when I said company A acquires company B, indirectly means I am saying that company A is acquiring the control over company B. How control is acquired, we will talk at great length under Ind AS 110, because Ind AS 110 actually explains at great length the definition of the control. But here, because we have to discuss the things, so let me make it clear, and moreover you are also aware, when I say we acquire the control of the other entity, indirectly it means I have acquired more than 50% stakes in the other entity. Then only the control can be in my hands. Are you getting my point or not? Because you know, in a company the majority decisions are passed through the voting rights. If I acquire more than 50% voting rights in this particular entity, quite obviously now this particular company will be in my control, correct? However, control can also be exercised by way of some agreement. For example, suppose I say I acquire only 20% control in company B, but there is an agreement that I will be responsible for all the financial, operational, and other functional, what we call affairs of company B. So indirectly, it means that basically I am running the company B, so control is in my hand. Further, there could be an agreement. Let us say I have only 30% stakes in company B. I have only 30% stakes in company B, but there is an agreement among the shareholders that company A will have the right to compose the board of directors of this particular entity. Correct? So even in that case, it will be presumed that control is in the hands of company B. What I am saying, in fact, that is what Ind AS 110 states, but presently at this moment we are doing Ind AS 103. As I said, Company A has acquired the control over company B, and control is defined by Ind AS 110, as we are going to see later on when we are going to pick up this particular chapter, consolidation. Over there we will discuss the definition of control at great length, but here, just to make the point a little bit clear, I'm saying that control can be acquired either through controlling rights, we call it voting rights, or by way of some agreement. The agreement could be that we will be responsible for all the functional affairs of the other entity, or there is an agreement that we shall have the right to compose the board of director. To compose the board of director basically means we shall have the right to appoint, to discard, or to set the remuneration of the board of director. When such rights is in our hand, then we say control is in our hand. So whenever in this chapter I will say that company A or so and so company is acquiring the other entity, whenever I would say in this particular chapter, it automatically means I am saying that this entity is acquiring the control over other entity, correct? So now presume there is company A and there is another company, company B, and I say company A acquires the control. Company A acquires control over company B, or simply when I say company A acquires company B, it automatically means I am saying company A acquires control over company B. Is it clear to you or not? I have just told you how the control can be acquired. Let us say we have acquired 70% stakes in company B. Because our stakes are more than 50%, so we may say that our voting rights are more than 50% in this particular entity. So this entity, company B, is now under our control. In Ind AS 103, this company which is taking the control of the other entity will be called acquirer. This company will be called acquirer, correct? Remember, under AS 14, you used to call this company as vendor company or selling company. Now, this company whose business is being taken over will be termed as acquiring company. Acquiring company. Just allow me to say, explain the things a little bit in Hindi also. कंपनी ए ने कंपनी बी को एक्वायर करा, इसका मतलब है कंपनी ए ने कंपनी बी का कंट्रोल हासिल करा। कंट्रोल कैसे हासिल करा जा सकता है? जब हम किसी दूसरी एंटिटी के 50% से ज्यादा के वोटिंग राइट्स खरीद लें या हासिल कर लें। मैंने ये भी कहा कि कंट्रोल केवल वोटिंग राइट से ही हासिल नहीं करा जा सकता, कभी कभी एग्रीमेंट के थ्रू भी हासिल करा जा सकता है। सपोज हमारी कंपनी के पास अधिकार है इस कंपनी के बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स को कंपोज करने का, या हमारी कंपनी के पास ये अधिकार है इनकी तमाम फाइनेंशियल ऑपरेशनल मैटर्स को होल्ड करने का, तो उस केस में भी कंट्रोल हमारे हाथ में माना जाएगा। एनीवे, हम मान लेते हैं कि इस केस में कंपनी ए ने कंपनी बी के 70% स्टेक्स खरीदे, तो इसका मतलब कंपनी ए ने कंपनी बी के ऊपर कंट्रोल हासिल कर लिया है, या कंपनी ए ने कंपनी बी को एक्वायर कर लिया है। मैंने कहा जब भी मैं इस चैप्टर में ये बोलूं कि हमारी कंपनी ने दूसरी कंपनी को टेक ओवर कर लिया है, तो इसका ऑटोमेटिकली मतलब है कि हमारी कंपनी ने दूसरी कंपनी का कंट्रोल हासिल कर लिया है, करेक्ट? अब मैंने ये भी बताया कि जो कंपनी दूसरी कंपनी को टेक ओवर करेगी उसको इंड एस 103 में हम एक्वायरर कंपनी बोलेंगे, और जिस कंपनी को लिया जा रहा है उसको हम एक्वायरी कंपनी बोलते हैं, एक्वायरी कंपनी बोलेंगे। इज इट क्लियर टू यू और नॉट? अब एक बड़ी चीज है, हम जिस कंपनी को ले रहे हैं ये कंपनी अपने आप में बिजनेस की डेफिनेशन को पूरा करे ऐसा होना चाहिए। बिजनेस की डेफिनेशन को इस एंटिटी ने पूरा करना चाहिए, तभी इंड एएस इस पे अप्लाई होगा। अगर मैं आपको सिंपली ये बोलूं कि कंपनी ए ने कंपनी बी को टेक ओवर करा, क्या ये बिजनेस कॉम्बिनेशन है या नहीं, ये इस बात पे डिपेंड करता है कि कंपनी बी बिजनेस की डेफिनेशन को कंप्लीट पूरा कर रही है या नहीं कर रही है। Remember one thing, when I say company A is taking over company B, that doesn't mean that Ind AS 103 will automatically apply. It is important to see to it that company B must be meeting the definition of business. What is business? We will see later on. Accounting standard Ind AS 103 has defined business this way around. That is inputs plus processes. Inputs plus processes. Inputs plus processes. What we mean by input? Inputs basically here signifies group of assets. When I say company is taking over company B, it means we are taking over a group of assets. Besides, we are also taking over the processes, because processes simply means set of activities. Set of activities. Processes means set of activities. Set of activities. So whenever we would say that so and so company is taking over the other company, first of all, we will have to see that other entity must meet the definition of the business. Now, business Ind AS 103 explains as inputs plus processes. Inputs basically means group of asset and processes means set of activities. And if we can combine these group of assets with set of activities, then they must be capable of producing some output or we call economic benefits to the entity which is taking over the business. For example, if I am taking over the business of some other entity, that means I am taking the group of assets and set of activities, and if I can combine both these two, then I shall be in a position to derive some output, or I shall be in a position to derive some economic benefits. Remember one thing I just told before the start of this particular session, that we have kept in our study material nearly 20 sections. One section I have completely devoted to the case studies of the business. So over there also I am going to explain the term business at great length. So first of all, you need to understand that this particular standard will come into play only when a particular entity will take over the other entity, and other entity meets the definition of the business. And business means simply group of assets plus set of activities, and group of assets and set of activities combinedly should be in a position to produce output or economic benefits. Economic benefits means could be simply returns, and returns could be in the form of profits or dividend. Correct? If I am taking over company B and company B meets the definition of business, then only Ind AS 103 will apply. That means if company A is taking over company B, but company B fails to meet the definition of the business, then Ind AS 103 will not apply. Is it clear to you? In this entire chapter, I just reminding you again, whenever I would say company is taking over company B, indirectly means I am saying company A is taking over the control of company B. Control can be acquired through voting rights generally. When we acquire more than 50% stakes in other entity, automatically control will be in our hand. However, control could be by way of some agreement. For example, if there is an agreement between A and B that company A shall have the right to constitute the board of directors of company B, so even in that case, it will be presumed that control is in my hands. Now, you have to be very, very well prepared with the fact that Ind AS 3 basically stresses upon the accounting in the books of the acquirer. In this case, company A is the acquirer. Basically, the theme of Ind AS 3 is that it will provide some guidelines, or it will establish some principles, correct, with respect to the recognition and measurement of assets and liabilities which we are going to get from the other entity. Because if I am going to take over company B, quite obviously I will have some assets and liability which I will take, correct. Besides, this particular Ind AS provides some guidelines with respect to what we call recognition and measurement of NCI, goodwill, and gain on bargain purchase. We will talk about it now, all these facets at great length, correct. So this is just an overview. So now these are the rough sheets, and you pull out your pen and pencil and start what we call writing with me. Business combination, nearly 100 questions we are going to do in the class itself. So you have to show a little bit of patience, and at the same time, all the module questions will be covered. So business combination, please presume you are sitting in the class itself. Be honest to yourself. Business combination. I told you the name of the chapter is business combination and corporate restructuring. We call it business combinations only, but I am going to write here full. Business combination and corporate restructuring. Corporate restructuring. Restructuring. I also told you that this particular topic is covered under Ind AS 103 or we can say IFRS 3. Correct? So first of all, you write along with me. Point number 1, standard. As I told you, what is the theme of this particular standard? Standard provides many a student later on will make the request, sir, please also release the handwritten notes. That is not possible. You will have to write each and everything. Correct? Standard provides some guidelines. Just a moment ago, I told you what sort of guidelines this standard provides. Standard provides some guidelines and establishes principles and requirements for an acquirer. Who is an acquirer? Just a moment ago, I told you, suppose company A is taking over the business or control of company B, then company A will be called acquirer and company B will be called acquiring. Simultaneously, I will explain the points also, don't worry. Principles and requirements for an acquirer. That means this particular standard basically stresses upon acquirer, correct? ACQUIRER. Standard provides some guidelines, establishes principles and requirements for an acquirer regarding what? With respect to recognition and measurement. Many a time, actually, I have seen a student do not know the meaning of recognition and measurement. Please pay attention and clear it in advance. Remember, you are acquirer because you are taking over the business of company B. When we say you are taking over the business, that indirectly it means you are taking the control of company B. If you are taking the control of company B, it means later on you will have to prepare your consolidated financial statement. Correct? In the consolidated financial statement, quite obviously, you will have to combine your assets and the assets of company B. Correct? Similarly, your liabilities and liabilities of company B. Now, the point here is that when you are acquiring company B, indirectly means some assets and liabilities of company B are flowing towards you. Now, the standard provides some guidelines to us that at what value we have to record them. No doubt about that. But standard says that it provides some guideline with respect to recognition and measurement. What we mean by recognition? Do you know? For example, suppose I go to the market and bring, let us say 12 bananas, 1 dozen bananas, correct? I go to the market and bring 12 bananas, 1 dozen banana. When I reach the home, I find that out of these 12, 2 bananas are virtually in a stale condition. वो खाने लायक ही नहीं है. मैं बाजार से 12 केले लेकर के आया, घर में आके मैंने देखा 2 तो बिल्कुल ही खराब केले हैं. 2 bananas are absolutely in a stale condition. तो इसका मतलब मैं 2 bananas को क्या करूंगा, मैं फेंक दूंगा. Is it clear to you? मैं उनको नहीं खाऊंगा. Indirectly मैं बोलूंगा कि मैंने 12 में से 10 bananas recognize करे, 10 bananas मैंने अपने पास रखे. That is the point here. Recognize करने का मतलब to take them into account. The first question is that whether you should take them into account or not, because measurement will follow only after the recognition. If you haven't recognized anything as an asset, how can you measure it? So you must understand the meaning of recognition and measurement. So standard lays down some guideline with respect to recognition and measurement. Correct? What are those guidelines? We will talk about that later on. So first of all, we need to know that acquirer need to Pay attention towards the requirements with respect to recognition and measurement of one, identifiable assets. Identifiable assets. Identifiable assets. Second, liabilities assumed. So this standard provides some guidelines with respect to recognition and measurement of identifiable assets and liabilities which you have taken over, assumed. Besides, non-controlling interest. Non-controlling interest. Non-controlling interest. What we mean by non-controlling interest, that I will let you know in a short while. You will have to show a little bit of patience. So whenever a particular entity will acquire another entity, it will take care that it will have to take care of the guidelines of this particular standard, correct, with respect to recognition and measurement of identifiable asset and liability which it has taken over, and non-controlling interest, and further goodwill or gain on bargain purchase. This is a term which we will use so often during this particular discussion. Gain on bargain purchase. Gain on bargain purchase. If you remember under AS 14, when you used to pass entries in the books of purchasing company, there could be a possibility of goodwill or capital reserve. Honestly speaking, now capital reserve is nothing, rather gain on bargain purchase. Some new terminologies have come in. I will use the short form for it, GOBP, gain on bargain purchase. Correct? So if company A is taking over company B, so company A, the acquirer company, will have to take care of all the guidelines of this particular standard to identify with respect to identifiable asset which it has taken over. It will have to take care of all the guidelines with respect to recognition and measurement of the liability. Besides, there is a possibility of NCI, non-controlling interest. What exactly the non-controlling interest? Somebody has already given me the answer. It means minority interest, no doubt. Good. Absolutely. And goodwill or gain on bargain purchase. Correct. We will talk about it later on. Then point number 2, please be honest to yourself and please write. This will hold you in a very good state later on. Don't worry, I'm going to do in front of you 100 questions, not less than that. Remember one thing. Ind AS, you might be wondering, sir, how it is possible. You will see later on. First, I take time, especially in the first 2 sessions, correct, to just make your groundings absolutely strong and unflappable. Ind AS 103 applies to, as I told you earlier, Ind AS 103 will apply only when a particular entity will acquire the control of the other entity, and other entity must meet the definition of the business combination. Ind AS 103 applies to a transaction, or event, to a transaction or event that meets the definition of business combination. So Ind AS 103 will apply only when there is business combination, meets the definition of business combination. Business combination, correct? Even if you are tired, don't worry about it. Unless and until we are going to struggle hard, correct, we cannot reap fruits. So remember one thing. So definition of business combination. Point number 3. What exactly is the business? Just a moment ago I told you Ind AS 103 simply states business is nothing but it is input plus processes. Business simply means inputs plus processes. Inputs plus processes. And that must be equal to output. It means if company A is taking over business of company B, then indirectly it means company is taking over some inputs, that is group of assets. Inputs basically means group of assets. And processes means basically set of activities. Set of activities could be techniques, could be manpower, could be technical know-how, correct? So when I say we are taking over the business of some other entity, indirectly means we are taking over their group of assets, correct? An entire set of activities, and we are in a position to combine them. We are in a position to combine them. So by combining inputs and processes, I should be in a position to, I means the acquirer should be in a position to produce output. Output basically means economic benefits, and economic benefits means the acquirer should be in a position to acquire some profits or dividend. So if company A is taking over company B and company B meets the definition of business, then only Ind AS 103 will come into play. Is it clear to you or not so far till up to this particular stage? We are moving slowly in the initial stages, as everyone knows. This is the way actually I move. Then standard defines one important term known as business combination. Now what is business combination? We know the meaning of business now. So term business combination basically means any transaction or events. Term business combination refers to a transaction or an event in which acquirer now this sheet is completed. I will move over to the next sheet, in which acquirer acquires control of one or more businesses. So term business combinations means when we are getting the control of some other businesses. Indirectly it means some other entities, and other entities are meeting the definition of the business. That is what we mean by business combination. We have already defined acquiry, but just for the sake, I am writing acquirer and acquiry also. Acquirer is the entity. Little bit of patience on your part is needed. Is the entity that acquires control of other entity or entities, correct? And similarly, if I would ask you what you mean by acquiry, तो बेटे एक्वायरी कौन होता है? एक्वायरी वो एंटिटी होता है किसी बच्चे ने लिखा थैंक यू सो मच कि जून एग्जामिनेशंस में जितने भी क्वेश्चंस आए थे वो सारे आपके उसमें ऑलमोस्ट ऑल क्वेश्चंस इन सीएमए ऑफ जून एग्जामिनेशन आर फ्रॉम योर क्लास. थैंक यू सो मच. और हमारी कोशिश भी यही रहती है कि कोई भी ऐसा क्वेश्चन ना हो जो हमारे मटेरियल में कवर ना हो. मैंने कहा थोड़ा सा आप पेशेंस दिखाएंगे तो क्वाइट श्योरली I will see to it that each one of you come out with flying colors. Little bit of your patience. मैंने एक बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट अनाउंसमेंट क्लास के बिगिनिंग में आज करी थी. अभी मैं आज की क्लास में थोड़ा स्लोली मूव कर रहा हूँ, करेक्ट? डोंट वरी अबाउट दैट बिकॉज अभी इनिशियल सेशन है. एक मैंने अनाउंसमेंट ये करी थी, बहुत बच्चों को नेक्स्ट टाइम से ये ध्यान रखना होगा इस बात का, क्योंकि हमें अपनी एसोसिएटेड साइट्स का भी ध्यान रखना पड़ता है. तो जो अब ये लाइव सेशंस हो रहे हैं तो ये 24 और मैक्सिमम 30 आवर्स के बाद फिर यूट्यूब से टेक ऑफ कर लिए जाएंगे। तो इस बात का आप ध्यान रखें कि जो लाइव सेशन से उनको पूरा अटेंड करें और अटेंड ऑनेस्टी के साथ करें। देखो, इंसान दूसरों से बहुत आसानी से ऑनेस्ट हो सकता है। अपने आप से जो व्यक्ति ऑनेस्ट होता है ना, वो जिंदगी में हमेशा सक्सेस हासिल करेगा। टेक इट फ्रॉम माई साइड। एनीवे, एक्वायरी, तो मैं बता रहा था एक्वायरी कौन है। एक्वायरी इज द एंटिटी। अच्छा, मुझे एक बात जरा लिख करके बता दे मैसेज में कि ये जो मैं लिख रहा हूं ये क्लियरली लेजिबल हो रहा है या नहीं हो रहा। कई बार हमें पता नहीं लगता, नहीं तो मुझे जूम करना पड़ेगा थोड़ा सा। लेकिन प्रॉब्लम क्या होती है कि फाइनेंशियल रिपोर्टिंग या कॉर्पोरेट फाइनेंशियल रिपोर्टिंग जैसे जो मेरे सब्जेक्ट्स हैं, और उसमें बेसिकली मैं स्लाइड्स वगैरह यूज नहीं कर सकता जहां सब कुछ पहले से ही लिखा होता है और हमें से रीड करना होता है। तो इस तरह की टीचिंग मुझे पसंद नहीं है, तो इसलिए थोड़ा सा क्लियरली मुझे बता भी दें। एक्वायरी इज द एंटिटी whose control is being acquired. Whose control is being acquired. यहां तक तो मैंने नॉर्मल चीजें तुम्हें बताई। अब यहां से तुम्हें थोड़ा ध्यान देना पड़ेगा। अब हम आते हैं मेन चीज अकाउंटिंग में। मैंने शुरू में आपको यह कहा था कि इंड AS 3 बेसिकली स्ट्रेस करता है एक्वायरर की बुक्स को। Ind AS 3 basically provides guideline how the acquirer should do the accounting. It is very important to understand in the beginning itself. Correct? Now we are moving over to the accounting section. Accounting. The standard says that acquisition method shall be used for accounting for business combination. So first of all, let me write this. As per Ind AS 103, comma, acquisition method, ACQUISITION, acquisition method. What exactly acquisition method is, don't worry, you will be able to understand it in a short while. Acquisition method shall be used for accounting of business combination. Your work should be neat, tidy. Remember one thing, I promised you I will take the class in the same manner as I normally take the class. Correct? There will not be any shortcuts. There will not be any what we call something which I am going to reduce just to finish it up early. Nothing like that. Correct? But I need your association. I need your what we call complete dedication. Correct? So that is the, if these are the things I will find, quite obviously it will be helpful to you and also myself. So accounting. Now we move over to, now I have written C here 7.1. Basically point number 7 deals with accounting. Now whatever points I am going to write, all these will deal with accounting. So when acquirer will do the accounting, remember one thing, Ind AS 3 basically talks about from the perspective of the acquirer. जो Ind AS 103 है वो बेसिकली एक्वायरर के एंगल से हमें गाइडलाइंस देता है, वो एक्वायरी के एंगल से गाइडलाइन नहीं देता है। रिमेंबर वन थिंग। तो इसका मतलब जब कंपनी ए ने कंपनी बी का बिजनेस लिया तो इसका मतलब कंपनी ए एक्वायरर है। अब कंपनी ए किस तरीके से अपने बुक्स में अकाउंटिंग करेगी, तो हमें यह तो बताया गया है कि जो एक्वायरर है वो अपनी बुक्स में अकाउंटिंग करने के लिए एक्विजिशन मेथड का इस्तेमाल करेगा। अब एक्विजिशन मेथड क्या होता है, एक्विजिशन मेथड के अंदर क्या स्टेप्स हैं, तो लेट्स सी स्टेप्स। एक्विजिशन मेथड के अंदर अकाउंटिंग करने के क्या स्टेप्स हैं, पहले हम ये देखने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। आई हैव ऑलरेडी टोल्ड यू इन बिटवीन आई विल यूज हिंदी ऑल्सो। करेक्ट। 7.1 आपका पहला स्टेप क्या होगा। अब आप अपने आप को परज्यूम करें कि आप कंपनी ए हैं और आपने कंपनी बी का बिजनेस टेक ओवर करा या किसी दूसरी कंपनी का टेक ओवर करा। यू आर एक्वायरर, रिमेंबर वन थिंग। करेक्ट। अब आपको अपनी बुक्स में अकाउंटिंग करनी है। आप अपनी बुक्स में अकाउंटिंग करेंगे तो सबसे पहला काम क्या करेंगे, आपका सबसे पहला स्टेप होगा आइडेंटिफाइंग द एक्वायरर। यह पहला काम होता है, आइडेंटिफाइंग द एक्वायरर। अब आपके दिमाग में यह क्वेश्चन आ सकता है, जस्ट वेट लेट मी फिनिश इट अप फर्स्ट। आइडेंटिफाइंग द एक्वायरर। Identifying the acquirer, let me take a rough sheet. First of all, ये rough sheets यहाँ पड़ी रहती हैं. Suppose मैं कहूं कंपनी ए ने कंपनी बी को टेक ओवर करा. कंपनी ए इज टेकिंग ओवर कंपनी बी. Let us say company A acquired 70% stakes in company B. It means now company A has taken control of company B, or company A has acquired company B. Correct? I need not require to tell you that company A is the acquirer. I need not require to tell you now that company B is acquiree. So you may be wondering why I have written, or why standard is saying that first step is identifying the acquirer. Please pay attention. If company A has acquired 70% stakes in company B, I need not require to tell you that company A has acquired the control. Correct? Quite obviously, and no one requires any mental exercise here to find out who is the acquirer. No doubt, here company A is the acquirer and company B is the acquiree. However, in accounting terms, or I should call it in standards terminology, I will call it legal acquirer. Legal acquirer. He is legal acquirer and he is legal acquiree. If company is taking 70% control of company B, it means company A has got the control. So from the legal perspective, no doubt about that, A is the acquirer and B is the acquiree company. But here is the $1 trillion point now. इसमें कोई डाउट नहीं कि कंपनी ए लीगल एक्वायरर है और कंपनी बी लीगल सेंस में एक्वायरी है, क्योंकि कंट्रोल हमारे हाथ में, हमने 70% कंट्रोल इसमें ले लिया है. सो इट गोज विदाउट से. लेकिन हम फिर भी ये क्यों कहते हैं कि वी हैव टू आइडेंटिफाई द acquirer, we have to identify the acquirer. Indirectly, इस step का मतलब है we have to find out accounting acquirer. Accounting acquirer. We have to find out accounting acquirer. What does it mean? Because in rare situations we may find that even though I am the legal acquirer, but accounting acquirer may be company B. It is a possibility and we will see later on how it is a possibility. For example, here control is in our hand because we have taken the control, so we are the legal acquirer because we have acquired company B. So legally we are the acquirer and they are acquiring company. But let us say there is an arrangement between A and B that company B will have the control of all the financial matters, operational matters and everything. So in that case, even though I have acquired 70% stakes, but in substance control is in the hands of company B, because in substance control is in the hands of company B. So in that case, in such rare cases, company B, in spite of being legal acquiree, will be called accounting acquirer. That will, in that case, company B will have to do the recording accounting as per Ind AS 103. तो कभी कभी ऐसी पॉसिबिलिटी हो सकती है कि अकाउंटिंग एक्वायरर और लीगल एक्वायरर अलग अलग हो, पर 99.99% लीगल एक्वायरर ही अकाउंटिंग एक्वायरर होता है. जैसे कंपनी ए ने कंपनी बी का बिजनेस लिया, क्योंकि मोस्ट ऑफ द क्वेश्चंस में हमें सिर्फ इतना ही दिया रहता है कि कंपनी ए टुक 60% कंट्रोल, 70%, 80% कंट्रोल, और हमें आगे कुछ दिया नहीं होता है. तो इसका मतलब 99.99% लीगल एक्वायरर विल ऑल्सो बी द अकाउंटिंग एक्वायरर. But in rare situation, it could be a possibility that accounting acquirer may not be the legal acquirer. Acquiree, legal acquiree may be the what we call accounting acquirer. और जब ऐसा होता है उसको हम बाद में देखेंगे, ठीक है. सेक्शन 20 में हम इसकी चर्चा ज्यादा करेंगे. रिवर्स एक्विजिशन के केस की हम चर्चा करेंगे, लेकिन वो सबसे लास्ट में करी जाएगी. इसके भी हम क्वेश्चंस करेंगे. So you need not require to worry. So that is why this particular step has been enacted by the standard, that first of all you need to find out the acquirer. So let me here present it. Suppose there is company A and company A, let us say, acquires 70% stakes in company B. Company A acquires 70% stakes in company B. So without any doubt, company A is the acquirer. Company A is the acquirer and company B is the acquiring company. Company B is the acquiring company. Isn't it or not? I just told you it will be called legal acquirer and this company will be called legal acquiree. That means from the legal sense, from the angle of the law, company A has acquired stakes in company B. So legally, company A is the acquirer and company B is the acquiree. However, this step means identifying the accounting acquirer. Because it could be a possibility, as I told you, in spite of the fact that you have got 70% stakes in B, but it could be a possibility by way of arrangement, कंपनी ए ने कंपनी बी को टेक ओवर करा, 70% स्टेक्स हमारे पास आ गए. जो कंपनी टेक ओवर कर रही है तो लीगल सेंस में हम उसी को एक्वायरर कहते हैं. जिस कंपनी को लिया जा रहा है लीगल सेंस में, ये एक्वायरी है, क्योंकि आप किसी का बिजनेस ले रहे हैं तो आप एक्वायरर लीगल सेंस में. लेकिन कभी कभी ऐसा हो सकता है कि आप बिजनेस ले तो रहे हैं दूसरे का, लेकिन हो सकता है कंट्रोल दूसरे के पास ही हो. बाय वे ऑफ अरेंजमेंट ऐसा पॉसिबल हो सकता है. तो उस केस में स्टैंडर्ड कहता है अकाउंटिंग उसकी बुक्स में करी जाएगी जिसके पास कंट्रोल है. करेक्ट. सो मींस आइडेंटिफाइंग द अकाउंटिंग एक्वायरर. इज इट क्लियर टू यू और नॉट? तो इस स्टेप का बेसिकली मतलब क्या है. लेकिन मैंने यह भी कहा, बिकॉज क्वेश्चन में हमें सिर्फ इतना ही दिया रहता है कि ए ने बी में इन्वेस्ट करा, तो 99.99% जो लीगल एक्वायरर होगा वही अकाउंटिंग एक्वायरर होगा. हमें ज्यादा मेंटल एक्सरसाइज नहीं करनी पड़ेगी. लेकिन रेयर सिचुएशन में हमें देखना पड़ेगा. वो रेयर सिचुएशन कौन सी होगी? जब हम सेक्शन 20 करेंगे अपने स्टडी मटेरियल का, जहां हमने रिवर्स एक्विजिशंस के क्वेश्चंस करे हुए हैं, तो बहुत डिटेल में करे हुए हैं, तब मैं आपको डिटेल में बताऊंगा कि कब अकाउंटिंग एक्वायरर लीगल एक्वायरर से अलग हो सकता है. अब जैसे इस केस में अगर क्वेश्चन इतना ही कहे कि ए एक्वायर्ड 70% स्टेक्स इन बी, सो कंपनी ए इज लीगल एक्वायरर एंड कंपनी बी विल आल्सो बी कॉल्ड अकाउंटिंग एक्वायरर. 99.99% लीगल एक्वायरर इटसेल्फ विल बी द अकाउंटिंग एक्वायरर. करेक्ट. सो दिस इज योर फर्स्ट स्टेप. मैंने कहा presume yourself that you are taking over the control of the other entity. आपने किसी दूसरी कंपनी का कंट्रोल हासिल कर लिया, तो इसका मतलब आप लीगल एक्वायरर भी हैं और आप अकाउंटिंग एक्वायरर भी हैं. नंबर 1. अब उसके बाद आपको क्या करना है? What you have to do the next. Once it is determined that you are the accounting acquirer, now your duty is determination of acquisition date. It is very important. Determination of acquisition date. Determination of acquisition date. Determination of acquisition date. Determination of acquisition date. ये भी किसी कारण से जानना जरूरी है. लेटर ऑन जब हम अकाउंटिंग करेंगे तो तब आप देखेंगे कि इस डेट की इंपॉर्टेंस ज्यादा है. करेक्ट. तो मैं इसमें लिखा दूं, एज पर IndAS 103, acquirer shall determine the date. आप लीगल एक्वायरर के साथ साथ अकाउंटिंग एक्वायरर भी है. करेक्ट. थैंक यू वेरी मच, बिकॉज आई एम एक्सप्लेनिंग in Hindi, because when I took the last session I received nearly hundreds of messages to take the class in Hindi, but sometimes it becomes a little bit of problem to shift your gears from English to Hindi. Correct. As per IndAS 103, acquirer shall determine the date on which it obtains control. Obtains control. Just wait. Let me explain this point. Suppose your company A1 and you acquired 35% stakes in company B. You acquired only 35% stakes, and you acquired these stakes, let us say, on 30th of June 2022. Now, company A1 again acquired, let us say 40% stakes, again acquired 40% stakes on, let us say 31st August 2023. So this date will become date of acquisition or date of control because you had already 35% share. Now you have got 40% more stakes. So your total stakes now will become 75%. So that this date will be considered as date of control or date of acquisition. And this date need to be found out by the acquirer because it plays an important role in accounting in the books of acquirer. And remember, Ind AS 3 basically deals with accounting from the perspective of acquirer only. So you have acquired the control, correct? You have defined the date. Now the date on which you have got the control, on this date, now what you are going to do? The next step is 7.3. Next step is recognition of, after having determined recognition of, once you have determined the date of control, now on that date, you will recognize in your books, let me write also, recognition of A, identifiable assets. So your next step is to recognize the identifiable assets. Identifiable assets simply means which can be easily identified. You have taken, correct? You have taken what we call assets and liabilities of the other entity. Now your next step on the date of control is, out of those assets, which are the assets which you are going to recognize? Remember, I just explained the meaning of recognition. It means should you take them into account or not. Next step is recognition of assets. That means you will decide which assets you are going to recognize. Similarly, liabilities. You have taken over the liabilities. Now the point is that out of those liabilities, how many liabilities you are going to recognize? Liability is assumed, we call it. C, any NCI. NCI means non-controlling interest. I will explain the meaning later on of non-controlling interest. D, goodwill or gain on bargain purchase. Gain on bargain purchase. You are the acquirer. You have found out that you are also the accounting acquirer. You have determined the now date of control. On the date of control, your next duty is to recognize the assets, liabilities, any non-controlling interest, if there is any goodwill or gain on bargain purchase. This is your next task. Now, suppose you have determined that so many assets you are going to take into your account. Now, the next step is to measure them. Correct? 7.4. Next step is to measure them. At what value you should measure them? That is the point. Measurement. Measurement always follows the recognition. Measurement. Once you have decided that you are going to recognize so and so assets and so liability, तो बेटे नेक्स्ट स्टेप ये है कि उनको हमें मेजर करना है. अब मेजर हमें उनको कौन सी वैल्यू पे करना है? मेजरमेंट ऑफ aforementioned items, measurement of aforementioned items shall be at, मैं क्या लिख रहा हूं ध्यान से सुनो. नेक्स्ट स्टेप है कि एक बार आपने डिसाइड कर लिया कि हमने इनके इतने एसेट्स को रिकॉग्नाइज करना है, इतनी लायबिलिटी को रिकॉग्नाइज करना है, लेकिन उसके बाद उनको मेजर करना. आप मेजर किस वैल्यू पे करेंगे? एट व्हाट वैल्यू यू आर गोइंग टू मेजर देम? aforementioned items will be measured at fair value, because जो इंड एस हैं वो बेसिकली फेयर वैल्यू से ज्यादा रिलेट करते हैं. तो स्टैंडर्ड कहता है कि जो एसेट्स और लायबिलिटी आप अपनी बुक्स में रिकॉग्नाइज करेंगे, आप मतलब एक्वायरर, यू आर गोइंग टू मेजर देम एट फेयर वैल्यूज. लेकिन इसमें कुछ एक्सेप्शन है. मैं यहां पर एक पॉइंट क्लियर कर दूं पहले. एक पॉइंट में यहां पर लिख दूं, हालांकि उसको एक्सप्लेन मैं बाद में ही कर पाऊंगा. However, NCI, non-controlling interest, can be measured at fair value or proportionate basis. अब इसका क्या मतलब है, मैंने कहा ये वाला पॉइंट मैं थोड़ा सा आगे जाके ही आपको बता पाऊंगा जब मैं एनसीआई का कॉन्सेप्ट एक्सप्लेन करूंगा. करेक्ट. अब एक बड़ा पॉइंट क्या है, यहां से आपको जो और बच्चों को थोड़ी प्रॉब्लम आती है. अगर आप इस पॉइंट को समझ गए तो बाद में इस चैप्टर को समझने में आपको बहुत आसानी होगी. नाउ प्लीज पे अटेंशन. What I said that now the next point is very important because although it is given in the module or it is given in the study materials, it is given in the standard, but we fail to understand the impact of this particular point. So please pay attention. 7.5 is the next point. 7.5. That is exception to. आपने पढ़ा हुआ है ना ये पॉइंट अपने मॉड्यूल्स में, बुक्स में. एक्सेप्शंस टू रिकग्नाइजेशन प्रिंसिपल. टू रिकग्निशन प्रिंसिपल. बताओ इसका क्या मतलब है. एक्सेप्शंस टू रिकग्नाइजेशन प्रिंसिपल का क्या मतलब निकला, इसका क्या मतलब है, पहले जरा ये पॉइंट में क्लियर कर दूं. रफ शीट्स जरा मैं ले. हाँ जी, मैंने कहा मैं एक्वायरर हूं. मैंने ये भी बताया कि आप एक्वायरी हैं, मैंने आपका बिजनेस ले लिया, मैं एक्वायरर हूं. करेक्ट. मैंने डिसाइड कर लिया कि इस दिन डेट ऑफ कंट्रोल है, इस दिन मुझे कंट्रोल मिला. जिस दिन मुझे कंट्रोल मिला, अब उस दिन मैंने डिसाइड कर लिया मैं आपके इतने एसेट, इतनी लायबिलिटी रिकग्नाइज करूंगा, इतना नॉन कंट्रोलिंग इंटरेस्ट रिकग्नाइज करूंगा, इतनी गुडविल रिकग्नाइज करूंगा. ये कैसे करूंगा ये बात का टाइम, लेकिन मैंने डिसाइड कर लिया कि मैं इतने इतने एसेट्स और लायबिलिटी रिकग्नाइज करूंगा. आफ्टर हैविंग टेकन ओवर द कंट्रोल, on the date of control, I will decide that so many assets, so many liability and NCI at this value and goodwill at this value I am going to recognize. Now the next point is at what amount should I measure them? Standard says that generally all the items which you have decided to recognize should be measured at fair value. Correct? So logically you should measure them at fair value. However, standard gives a leeway of freedom that NCI can be measured at fair value or on proportionate basis, but I also told that I will explain this point later on when we are going to do some practicals on calculation of NCI and goodwill. Now, this step, exception to recognition principle, what does it means actually? Exception to recognition principle. Please pay attention. Exceptions to recognition principle means, for example, suppose if I am company A and I am the acquirer and I am taking over company B. Let us say company B is having a contingent liability. Contingent liability. Now, Ind AS 37 defines contingent liability as present obligation. Do you know the meaning of present obligation? Do you know the meaning of present obligation? Let us say my financial year is ending on this date, 31st of 3/23. And let us say on this date, I am making the financials. Correct? If there is any obligation means any liability. Let us say a case has been filed against our company and it is still on. That means on this date, this case is still going on. It means on this date, the day on which we are preparing our financials, that means on this date, there is an obligation upon us. Obligation. Correct? Now suppose we feel that chances are there that we will lose the case. If we will lose the case, then we will have to compensate the other party. Correct? So if we will lose the case, we will have to compensate the other party. That means there will be outflow of funds. There will be outflow of funds. Ind AS 37 defines contingent liability as a present obligation, and if there is probability of outflow of funds. Correct? then only contingent liability should be recognized. Then only it should be recognized. Is it clear to you? So, general rule is that contingent liabilities are recognized only. This is the general rule. Contingent liabilities are recognized only when there is present obligation, and at the same time we are quite sure or there is greater probability that outflow of cash will take place. Correct? Now, the point, try to understand this point now. This is Ind AS 37 states. Logically, it means if company B is having a contingent liability, and if there is no probability of outflow of funds, so logically it should not be recognized. Because standard says, Ind AS 37 says that contingent liability should be recognized only when there is probability of outflow of funds. अगर probability of outflow of funds होगी तो contingent liability recognize करी जाती है, अपनी बुक्स में लिखी जाती है. लेकिन अगर probability of outflow of funds नहीं है तो इसका यह मतलब निकलता है कि स्टैंडर्ड कह रहा है कि इनको रिकॉग्नाइज नहीं करना चाहिए. लेकिन अब मैंने क्या कहा, देखो इसका टाइटल क्या लिखा मैंने, एक्सेप्शंस टू द रिकॉग्नाइजेशन प्रिंसिपल. एक्सेप्शन टू द रिकॉग्नाइजेशन प्रिंसिपल. तो अभी अभी तुमने प्रिंसिपल क्या पढ़ा कंटिंजेंट लायबिलिटी का? प्लीज रिपीट व्हाट यू हैव लर्न. क्या प्रिंसिपल है कंटिंजेंट लायबिलिटी को रिकॉग्नाइज करने का? आप कब रिकॉग्नाइज करोगे? जब प्रोबेबिलिटी ऑफ आउटफ्लो ऑफ फंड्स होगी. दिस इज द जनरल प्रिंसिपल. लेकिन अगर मैं जनरल प्रिंसिपल से हटकर के कोई चीज करूंगा देन आई विल बिकम एन एक्सेप्शन टू इट. करेक्ट? अब इंड एस क्या कहता है कि अगर हम किसी का बिजनेस टेक ओवर कर रहे हैं, if we are taking over the business of somebody else and that party is having a contingent liability, we are going to recognize it irrespective of the fact whether there is probability of outflow of funds or not, irrespective of that. So that is why it is called exceptions to recognition principle. Is it clear to you or not? You got my meaning? You got it or not? हम इसको क्यों कहते हैं? ये अपवाद है, क्योंकि जनरल रूल ये है कि कंटिंजेंट लायबिलिटी को तभी रिकॉग्नाइज करना चाहिए जब प्रोबेबिलिटी ऑफ आउटफ्लो ऑफ फंड्स हो. लेकिन इंड एस क्या कहता है कि अगर आप किसी दूसरी पार्टी को टेक ओवर कर रहे हैं और वो दूसरी पार्टी बिजनेस है, उसकी कोई कंटिंजेंट लायबिलिटी है, तो आपने उसको रिकॉग्नाइज करना ही करना है, चाहे प्रोबेबिलिटी ऑफ आउटफ्लो ऑफ फंड्स हो या ना हो. दैट इज व्हाई इट हैज बिकम एन एक्सेप्शन, जिसको आप हिंदी में कहते हैं कि ये अपवाद है. Is it clear to you or not? तो पहले तो ये समझ में आना चाहिए जो मैंने आपको बात बताई. तो एक्सेप्शन ये कई बार बच्चे पढ़ते हैं पर उनकी समझ में नहीं आता. तो एक्सेप्शन टू रिकॉग्नाइजेशन प्रिंसिपल, तो इसके अंदर मैंने क्या लिखा, कंटिंजेंट लायबिलिटी should be contingent liability should be recognized. Contingent liability should be recognized irrespective of probability, चाहे probability of outflow of funds हो या ना हो, irrespective of that हमने उसको recognize करना ही करना है. इसलिए ये exception है, इसलिए ये रिकॉग्नाइजेशन प्रिंसिपल का एक्सेप्शन है. समझ में आया? कंटिंजेंट लायबिलिटी शुड बी रिकॉग्नाइज्ड इररिस्पेक्टिव ऑफ प्रोबेबिलिटी ऑफ आउटफ्लो ऑफ फंड्स. दैट इज व्हाई इट इज एन एक्सेप्शन. आउटफ्लो ऑफ फंड्स. तो इसका मतलब इफ यू आर एन एक्वायरर एंड यू आर टेकिंग ओवर द बिजनेस ऑफ समबडी एंड दैट पर्टिकुलर पार्टी इज हैविंग अ कंटिंजेंट लायबिलिटी, irrespective of the fact, that means without bothering about the fact that whether probability of outflow of funds is there or not, you are going to recognize it. मैं यहां पर यह भी लिख दूं, the general principle or general rule regarding contingent liability is that contingent liability should be recognized only when there is probability of outflow of funds. There is probability of outflow of funds. This is general rule. लेकिन हम जनरल से हट के काम कर रहे हैं. That is why it has become exception. तो जब आप अपने एसेट्स और लायबिलिटीज को रिकॉग्नाइज करेंगे, यू नीड टू हैव ए नॉलेज रिगार्डिंग कंटिंजेंट लायबिलिटी दैट यू आर गोइंग टू रिकॉग्नाइज इट irrespective of the fact whether what we call there is probability of outflow of funds or not. फिर स्टैंडर्ड क्या कहते हैं? Then what standard says? एक्सेप्शन. ये पॉइंट्स बच्चे पढ़ते हैं तो उनको समझ में नहीं आते हैं और बहुत से लोग समझा नहीं पाते हैं. एक्सेप्शन टू रिकॉग्निशन and measurement. Because you are the acquirer, you have to recognize the things and you have to measure them. So you need to know all these points, correct? Now there are some exception to recognition and measurement with respect to income tax. Let me finish, then I am going to explain. Income tax, employee benefits, employee benefits, एक वर्ड में लिख रहा हूं, पता नहीं तुमने इसका मीनिंग पता है या नहीं पता है. इंडिम्निफिकेशन, इंडिम्निफिकेशन, इंडिम्निफिकेशन एसेट. नाउ मेरे को एक रफ शीट लेने दो पहले, फिर मैं एक्सप्लेन करूं. शीट्स भी बहुत लगती हैं, यहां पर कहां चलेगी रफ शीट्स किधर है? बेटा एक बात बताओ मुझे, प्लीज लेट मी नो. सपोज you are company A, you are acquirer, you have taken the control of company B. Company B has, let us say, income tax, liability of income tax, liabilities in the form of income tax, employee benefits, and they have got some assets, indemnification asset. What we mean by indemnification asset? What we mean by indemnification asset? Simple words means indemnification asset means which is not my asset yet, which is not my asset yet, but it can become my asset simply because of the fact that, no doubt about that, Sheikh Hafiz, we are going to keep it at least for 24 hours, no doubt about it. Indemnification asset means, indemnification means to compensate somebody, to compensate somebody, to compensate somebody. Just पहले मैं इसको एक्सप्लेन कर दूं. लेट मी एक्सप्लेन इट. सपोज कंपनी बी हैज ए करंट लायबिलिटी ऑफ 500 lakhs. Because I am acquirer, I will have to recognize this liability. We have just studied. Irrespective of the fact whether there is probability of outflow of funds or not. मैं कंपनी ए हूं, मैंने कंपनी बी को लिया. कंपनी बी की एक कंटिंजेंट लायबिलिटी, करंट लायबिलिटी नहीं, कंटिंजेंट लायबिलिटी है और मुझे इसको रिकॉग्नाइज करना पड़ेगा, मुझे इसको अपनी बुक्स में लिखना पड़ेगा विदाउट बॉदरिंग अबाउट द फैक्ट वेदर देयर इज आउटफ्लो ऑफ फंड्स और नॉट. करेक्ट, नंबर वन. लेकिन जनरली क्या होता है कि जब हम किसी कंपनी का बिजनेस लेते हैं और उस कंपनी की कोई कंटिंजेंट लायबिलिटी होती है तो हम उस कंपनी को कहते हैं भाई ये लायबिलिटी तो आपकी थी और हमें लेनी पड़ रही है बेवजह की. करेक्ट. तो दूसरी पार्टी ने क्या कहा? दूसरी पार्टी यानी कि कंपनी बी ने क्या कहा? आई विल स्पीक लेटर ऑन इन हिंदी ऑल्सो, इन इंग्लिश ऑल्सो. कंपनी बी ने कहा इट्स ओके, यू टेक ओवर दिस लायबिलिटी, बट वी प्रॉमिस, हम प्रॉमिस करते हैं कि अगर फ्यूचर में दिस लायबिलिटी विल मैच्योर, इफ दिस लायबिलिटी विल मैच्योर, वी विल गिव यू 400 lakhs. You got my point or not? There is a contingent liability of company B. Now, because of guidelines of Ind AS 103, company A being the acquirer, it will have to now recognize this contingent liability. Now, suppose because it is a contingent liability, there may be outflow of funds or there may not be outflow of funds. But presuming that, let us say after 4-5 years, after having taken over the business, and then after 4-5 years, this liability, let us say, matured. So who will have to pay now? Because we have recorded this liability, so we are responsible to now pay. So it means we will have to meet this liability. So that is the danger when we take over the contingent liability, but unfortunately we will have to take it. The reason being is that standard says so. So general rule is that in practical life, what happens when a company takes over the other entity and other entity has a contingent liability, we make an arrangement with them. We are taking over your contingent liability, but tomorrow if this particular liability would mature, then you are going to compensate us. You are going to indemnify us. So indemnify का मतलब है compensate करना. You will indemnify us, let us say 400, 500 lakhs, whatever the agreed amount is. तो इस केस में ये अमाउंट 400 को इंडिम्निफिकेशन एसेट कहेंगे और इसको हम क्या कहेंगे, कंटिंजेंट लायबिलिटी कहेंगे. अब मेरा पॉइंट पहले तो ये है, प्लीज पे अटेंशन. नाउ यू नो द मीनिंग ऑफ इनकम इंडिम्निफिकेशन एसेट. अब मैंने कंपनी बी को लिया, उनका कोई इनकम टैक्स है, उनका कोई एम्प्लॉय बेनिफिट्स हैं, ये तो लायबिलिटीज हैं क्योंकि ये इन्होंने पे करने होते हैं, और एक इंडिम्निफिकेशन एसेट्स भी है इनका. करेक्ट. मुझे ये बताओ, मैंने पहले टाइटल में क्या लिखा है, एक्सेप्शन टू रिकॉग्नाइजेशन एंड मेजरमेंट. यानी कि मैं इस कंपनी बी को ले रहा हूं. अब पहला पॉइंट तो ये है कि क्या मैं इनको, पहले तो मुझे ये बताओ जनरल रूल क्या है. जनरल रूल तो ये है कि इन आइटम्स को हमें रिकॉग्नाइज नहीं करना चाहिए. दिस इज द जनरल रूल दैट वी शुड नॉट रिकॉग्नाइज दिस आइटम. Logically, if I am taking over somebody else's business and somebody has got an income tax liability and they have got a liability in the form of some employee benefits which they are supposed to pay, and at the same time they have got some indemnification assets, the general rule is that I should not recognize them. This is the general rule. But Ind AS says that we have to recognize. So that is why it becomes an exception to the what we call recognition. But we have written the title exception to recognition and measurement. That means these items are exception to recognition principle. You have understood now why? Because generally these items should not be recorded by the acquirer, but Ind AS says that we have to record it, so it becomes an exception to recognition principle, but at the same time it is also exception to measurement principle. How? Because generally these items are valued generally at book values or sometime at present values. Generally these items are measured at book values or present values, but we have to measure them here. Sorry, the general rule is that these items are generally measured at book value and present value, and standard says that in the earlier stages we saw, standard says that whatever items you are going to measure them at fair value. But regarding these items, standard says that we have to measure them either at book value or present value. So that is why these items will become exception to measurement principle also. You got my point or not? ये तुम्हारी समझ में आ गया कि नहीं आ गया कि ये टाइटल मैंने क्या लिखा है, एक्सेप्शन टू रिकग्निशन एंड मेजरमेंट. ये जो तीन आइटम हैं ये अपवाद हैं, एक्सेप्शन है रिकग्नाइजेशन प्रिंसिपल के. क्यों है? प्लीज लेट मी नो. प्लीज राइट योर आंसर. व्हाई दीज आर एक्सेप्शंस? प्लीज राइट. टेक योर टाइम. आई विल गिव यू some time to actually answer me, or you can simply say actually yes or not whether you have understood or not. These items are exception to recognition because the general rule is that we should not recognize them, but Ind AS say we will have to recognize. That is why it is an exception. Second, it is also exception to measurement rule because generally Ind AS says that whatever items you are going to actually record should be at fair value. But regarding these items, the rule is that we may have to use either the book value or the present value or some agreed value. It could be agreed value also. Correct? So that is why it is an exception to both recognition and principle. Is it clear to you or not? Now, last point, 7.7, exception to measurement principle. Exception to measurement principle. So there are some items of the acquiring company which you will have to take into your account. There are some exception. There are some exception to recognition and measurement, and there is some exception with respect to measurement principle only. Only it is not an exception to recognition, but it is with respect to principle. What are these items? Reacquired rights. Reacquired rights. What do you mean by reacquired rights? Let me explain it. Let us say Welkins Educational is an organization in Delhi and it has a franchise, let us say, in Odisha or Odisha nowadays we call it. Correct? Let us say it has a franchise in Odisha. Now let us say tomorrow that when I say it is my franchise, it means I have given them the right to use my name, use our reputation, our goodwill, whatever it is. Now let us say after some time I take over this company, indirectly means the rights which I had given to them, now I am retaking or I am taking them back. So that is why it will be called reacquired rights. Correct? So reacquired rights, share-based payments, share-based payments. Assets held for sale. Assets held for sale. Let us say I am taking over the business of somebody. Correct? Exception to recognition and measurement. Here I haven't written. Let me write here. Shall be recognized. Shall be recognized. And shall be measured at, or I should write, shall not be measured at fair value. This is with respect to these three items regarding which we discussed earlier. Now regarding these items, these are exception to measurement principles. That means generally whenever you are taking over the business of somebody and that particular business is having what we call these type of items, such items are generally recorded and you will have to also record it. Correct? So these items are exception to measurement principle because the measurement principle says in days that you need to measure them at fair value. But these items will be measured as per the respective guidelines of the respective Ind AS. Shall be measured as per respective Ind AS. Respective Ind AS guidelines. For example, in assets held for sale, suppose I am taking over business of somebody and that particular business has some assets which are meant for sale. So assets held for sale come under the purview of Ind AS 105. So their measurement will be done as per the Ind AS which are applicable to these items. Logically, it means these items will not be measured at fair value, rather as per the guidelines of the respective Ind AS. Similarly, share-based payment will be measured as per Ind AS 102 and so on. Correct? So these are the things which you need to know. Now we come over slowly to the practical part. Correct? Once you have got yourself familiar with the fact that on the date of control, how you are going to recognize and measure the respective assets and liability. Now the next point is measurement of goodwill. Measurement of goodwill. Measurement of goodwill or gain on bargain purchase. I told you earlier. Now please pay attention. How to compute goodwill or gain on bargain purchase, that will be the theme, of course, but we will talk about, I know that each one of you are quite eager that I should start this topic today itself, but we will take up this topic in the next session, and because we have got a time limit set over here and we are almost reaching the end of that particular time limit, so before it ends and the session ends abruptly, let me finish it earlier. In the next session, which will be held day after tomorrow at 8:30 p.m. At 8:30 p.m. itself, but day after tomorrow, after some time, I will make the classes regular. Don't worry about this thing. Day after tomorrow, we shall meet. You need not require to post any questions like, sir, we will get PDF notes or not. Number one, each one of you will get it. You need not require to write. But before that, let me make it clear. I want from each one of you comments, suggestion regarding the quality of the class in the comment boxes of the YouTube, not on live chats. So let me see, and the best one definitely I'm going to see to it is pinned, correct? So that will help not only, as I said even in the last session, us, but also the other student to have an idea regarding the sessions, correct? Because some may feel these are simply run-of-the-mill classes. So it is nothing like that. These are as serious classes as I normally take. So you must have got a glimpse of the same. And in the next session, we are going to take up what we call practical part. And in class, there will be 80 to 100 questions we are going to do. This is a surety from our side. So on such note, I finish up this session and hope that, as usual, each one of you must have enjoyed the same. It looks, and quite obviously, it's time to say now goodbye and good night from here in Delhi, and God bless you.